Ready?
Yeah.
Okay, so we're going to do pivot hem. The first thing we need to do, which we always do whenever we do hems, is you go in and you fold up your hem and press your hem on whatever you're doing the direction that it needs to go, so that you get that nice crease in the hem ready. It just helps you to sew, it helps you to see, so it comes together quite well at the end. So this hem here has got a 3 centimetre hem on it. So we need to make sure that we maintain our 3 centimetre hem all the way through, and then we will go over to the iron and give him a really good press. I'm going to do the fake press, but I want you guys to go to the iron and do the real press. I'm doing the fingernail press right now. It doesn't have to go through the seam allowance on that centre front section where your facing attaches, just on where the actual true width of your hem facing folds up. When it comes into your seam allowance, that should be a 1 centimetre seam allowance there. Okay, but the maintain of this is 3. It should have a notch on the end to indicate what the seam allowance is for your bulk of your hem. Alrighty, so just press hem up. That's the first step you do on any jacket that you're doing. You go through and you press up all your hems on all your panels. You go through and do that first, just so you know it makes life easier. Okay, the next thing we're going to do is we're going to flatbed our lining to our main at the hem. So if I flick this over, this is my centre front. That's my pivot corner section. That's why it's called a pivot corner, because we're going to pivot that around that corner. I'm going to put my right side of my lining to my right side of my main, and we're going to stitch a 1 centimetre seam allowance along that hem. This is cut work. In your work, if this was your actual garment, this end and that end there should, on your lining and main, should absolutely meet. But because this is pre-cut work, what we're finding is that this lining is fractionally longer. Start from the side that's closest to your hem, that pivot corner section. That needs to meet absolutely perfectly. Whatever excess you have hanging over the end, don't worry about it, because that's closest to your side seam. It's actually out of the scope of what we're doing, so it's not relevant. But yeah, but definitely start the side that's closest to, and we're stitching 1 centimetre seam allowance. Yeah, make sure those two ends meet perfectly. It's really important for your pivot hem. That's the corner you're going to pivot, whereas this is your corner side that's closer to your side seam, so it doesn't matter. But like I said, in a perfect world, when you're doing it in your garment, these should both match perfectly when you're tracing off your pattern pieces. So we've flatbedded those together. We're now going to flatbed our main facing. Our main to our facing along the centre front there. Okay, so that's your centre front, that's your front hem, and that will fold up into your side front hem with your lining. So we're going to flatbed down there 1 centimetre. We're doing 1 centimetre seam allowances on this garment, but really depending on your seam allowances that you've set for your pattern, it may be different. On future demos, you might find that we do a 1.5 seam allowance. It depends on your garment that you're doing. If you've got a really bulky fabric, then you do a wider seam allowance, because on a big bulky fabric, this tends to, when you're stitching in that seam, it tends to sponge in and down, which means you lose some of your seam allowance. It's easier to sew with a wider seam allowance. So once we've stitched along that centre front, we're going to bluff that seam towards the facing. Okay, bluff it towards the facing. I'm pulling it apart so that we have a nice crisp flat seam. Make sure you're back tacking on either end as you're doing this. Really important. Alrighty, and then the lucky last thing we're going to do is we're going to mark in our pivot corner. And our pivot corner is this corner here. When this folds back onto itself, it's also that where that corner meets that corner. So we need to mark them in. I'm going to mark it on the wrong side of my fabric. And it's got a 1 centimetre seam allowance, and what I need is just that pivot corner. So I'm going to mark down. Let's see, my pen wants to work. Come on, pen, work. That's good. So it's just the corner that we want. So I'm just getting in. That's the corner there that we want. So I'm just a centimetre in and out. Then the same thing over here. A centimetre in and out just to catch that corner. Really important. If you were doing your true blue jacket, you probably wouldn't be using pen, you'd be using tailor's chalk. You might be actually stitching into it by hand so that you get that tack stitch, and then you can pull it out afterwards. Try to do it on your wrong side, because that way it's not visible to the outside world when you stitch them together on the good side. But you need to draw in your 2 pivot corners, really important. Okay, I'm just going to pull that down so you can see how that would sit. There are your 2 pivot corners. Make sure it's a centimetre seam allowance where it meets. Okay? Thank you.